Well, it is a beautiful day in England. We've been absolutely hammered by Storm Dara. I may have to spend a lot of this video walking backwards just to shield from the wind so that you can hear anything. But regardless of the weather, there's no excuse to not walk your dog, and there's no excuse not to make a YouTube video, apparently, although part of me is wishing I wasn't. Anyway, I managed to go into my Bergen and pull out my smock, my waterproof smock, so we're all good. I want to talk today about the Reform Party and how I think the Reform Party have effectively become the opposition party. Despite only having 5 MPs and the Tories having, what, 150 or whatever it is, I don't even know. The Reform Party are clearly the opposition party. They are massively outmanoeuvring the Tories. And I'm going to talk about why that is, but it's so strange to me because for our entire political lives, when the Tories are in power, Labour are in opposition. When Labour are in power, the Tories are in opposition. It's always been that simple, but it doesn't feel like that anymore, does it? So I'll go through why I think the Reform Party have taken this massive step forwards. And a lot of the reasons come down to Reform themselves, obviously, the Tories themselves, but also Labour is really helping out with this. Let's get into it. Well, look, the first reason that I think the Tories have taken this step back from being the opposition party is the Tories themselves. Their record in office, 14 years of, if we're honest, not achieving very much. So they had a very low growth economy for the entire time that they were in power. So when Keir Starmer starts to tank the economy, which I think he will, what can they really say about it? They can't say that much. Or when Keir Starmer takes bribes from Lord Ali, for example, well, the Tories can't say anything. Yeah, Keir Starmer had some of his work clothes paid for him by Lord Ali. We understand that, and that's bad, and it's very annoying. But Boris Johnson got like 60 grand for wallpaper, so nobody's going to listen to the Tories. And the same thing for migration, but I'll come on to that a little bit later. So the point is, people really don't want to listen to the Tories anymore. They've had enough. Everything that they say to criticise Labour just sounds really hypocritical. Now, of course, I'm going to talk about immigration, and the Tories' record on immigration is clearly horrific. For the last few years, every year, we've welcomed 3 Cardiff cities worth of people from outside the EU. So that's just the numbers from outside the EU. Shocking. Now, what Keir Starmer did, and I do not believe the Tories expected this, is he stood on stage and he said that this was a deliberate experiment carried out against the will of the British people.
This happened by design, not accident. Policies were reformed deliberately to liberalise immigration, to turn Britain into a one-nation experiment in open borders. Global Britain. Remember that slogan? That is what they meant. A policy with no support and which they then pretended wasn't happening.
I don't think for a second the Tories thought that Keir Starmer, the Labour Prime Minister, the leader of the Labour Party, would go on stage and criticise higher levels of immigration. But he did. He's completely kicked the wind out of the sails of the Conservative Party. No longer can they talk about immigration, ever. They've lost all credibility on that. And that, I think Keir Starmer's been very clever. He realises that that is going to be the biggest issue. Because the Reform Party, Nigel Farage, are clearly going to keep pushing this issue of immigration. But now the Tories can't, with any sense of legitimacy, say anything about it. It's their fault. Actually, a very clever move from Keir Starmer. We don't usually give Keir Starmer any credit or any praise, but today we will. Bravo, political one-upsmanship. Good job, Keir. Now, the funny thing is, this attack on the Tories isn't just coming from Keir Starmer, because actually Dominic Cummings came out and said, yeah, Boris Johnson made the very deliberate decision to massively increase the numbers of migrants coming to the UK. And he said that Boris Johnson decided to do this because some of his friends at the Financial Times will be happy. I'll put the tweet in here. And I'm guessing that what Dominic Cummings means when he says that is that after Brexit, or just generally, we were probably meant to go into a bit of a recession. Boris Johnson didn't want to deal with a recession whilst he was in office, so he just flooded the country with migrants to stave it off for a few years. That is a complete betrayal of the British people. Because Boris Johnson didn't want to deal with a recession, he absolutely flooded our country with millions and millions and millions of migrants from outside the European Union. Utter betrayal. Absolute traitor. He knew that the British people did not want that. Absolutely did not want that. But you're probably thinking to yourself, well, Boris Johnson's gone, so how can I still hold that against the Conservative Party? He's no longer an MP, right? And that's true, but let's take a look at it. You know, when Boris Johnson left, Rishi Sunak continued it. Okay, so Rishi Sunak's gone, so why am I still holding the Tories to account? Because the Tories chose Kemi Badenoch. And Kemi Badenoch stood at the dispatch box and she said, I want more migration. I want more migrants. Lift all of the caps on migration. Let's lift all the caps on work visas and bring in as many people as we can. Lift all the caps on student visas. So that's Kemi Badenoch for you, and she's the leader of the Tories.
Kemi Badenoch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a first-generation immigrant, can I welcome the Home Secretary's statement, which I feel this immigration white paper is a move from the 20th century to a much better future immigration system. In particular, I'd like to thank the Home Secretary for removing the annual limits on work visas and also on international students, both of which I lobbied for on behalf of the Wellcome Sanger Institute and Anglia Ruskin University, which serve my constituency.
So yes, they've got absolutely no leg to stand on when it comes to migration. And the Tories did this to themselves. They had a choice between Kemi Badenoch and honest Robert Jenrick, right? And Robert Jenrick, if they'd selected him, would have taken the wind out of the sails of the Reform Party. He was going to swing the party to the right, and he was going to have the country leave the ECHR.
The question we've got to ask ourselves is, does staying in the ECHR make us safer? Does it make the country more prosperous? Does it increase our influence in the world? And I think the answer to all those questions is no. This is a treaty, a convention that has been bent out of shape, out of all recognition to the original proponent. Winston Churchill would be aghast at what's happened to it. It is viewed by its activist judges as a living instrument. And you see on issues, whether it's security, borders, or now net zero, judges acting as politicians. This is bad for democracy. It's not in the interest of the British public. And I think it's time for us to leave.
That would have taken away a lot of the talking points of reform. The Tories then would be in a much better shape to pick up that centre-right and right-wing position. But they chose not to. And quite frankly, I've got to be careful how I say this, it's a little bit delicate, but they chose a first-generation migrant to put as their Prime Minister, someone who grew up in Nigeria and came to the UK. That's who they chose for the leader of their party. And everyone will see, when migration is the biggest issue, that she is going to be soft and sympathetic towards migration to the UK. People aren't going to put up with it. So the Tories have completely shafted themselves beyond recognition. I don't think they understand how bad some of their decisions have been. Okay, a slightly shorter walk for the dog today because the weather is absolutely abysmal. And I'm a little bit worried about the camera and the microphone setup. I think it's waterproof, but who knows? Anyway, what has Reform's answer been to all of this, to the Tories self-imploding? Well, Nigel Farage has made it very clear. He's opened the doors of the Reform Party to all of the Tories. They can come and join him. And he's taken in people like former Tory MP Andrea Jenkins, for example. She's going to stand to be the mayor of Lincoln, I believe. And not just that, Tim Montgomery, who is, I didn't really understand exactly who he is. Apparently he's a big deal in the Tory party. I've never heard of him before. But he's taken him in as well. And he's also opened the doors to all of the Tory councillors, which is kind of interesting. So their strategy, I guess, to attack the Tories is to take the Tories into the party. Now, I will come on to why I think that's a bit of a risk. But there is something very good about this. There are only a limited number of people who are interested in politics as a career, right? There are only so many people who want to go and be a councillor or an MP. And then the group of people who want to be like a centre-right party councillor or MP is even smaller than that list. So by taking these people into Reform and away from the Tories, it gives the Tories another headache. They have to find suitable replacements in those areas. So there's some good merits to the strategy. I understand what Nigel Farage is trying to do here. Now, I mentioned that there were some risks to this strategy, which there are. And the risk is that a lot of people who are currently on the right wing and support the Reform Party do so precisely because they're not the Tories. So by taking in all of these Tories, people might, I guess, think of them as the Tory Party 2.0 or not a serious contender to the uni party. That's a real risk. And I've already seen people leaving the Reform Party, but I guess also from what I see, more people than are leaving are joining. So it's a numbers game, right? Of course, some people, no matter what direction a party takes, are going to be unhappy and leave. And for Farage and Tice, it'll all be a numbers game. Can they, adopt some of these Tories and move a little bit towards the centre ground and gain more people than they lose on the right wing? And it seems, if what Reform are putting out is true, which I'm sure it is, then that's actually working. The numbers game is going in their favour. So I think they'll keep this going until that situation changes. Now, there is another risk beyond just the numbers, and it's shaping the party. So you have someone like Tim Montgomery, who I mentioned earlier, who I don't know that much about, but I'm told he was like a pretty senior advisor to Boris Johnson, and he's a One Nation Tory, right? When you take someone like that in, they're going to want to shape the party. They're going to want to mould the party in their image. And their image is probably going to look a lot like the Tories. So Nigel Farage just has to be very, very careful not to allow too many influences into the party that do genuinely end up making it look like similar to the Tories to the point where people won't vote for Reform anymore. So those are just the risks, I think. There's risks in every political strategy you take. Last time I put out a video saying there was a risk to a strategy Reform was taking, people lost their minds. Don't lose your mind. Be better than that. Honestly, that is ridiculous. Crying because I said there's a risk to a strategy and you got absolutely out of your mind and lost it. I think that's pretty lame. Constructive criticism back, sure. Telling me I work for 77 Brigade in the British Army and I'm doing a massive disinformation campaign against your favourite political party just because I said there was some risks to the approach that they were taking. It's pretty lame. Right. Let me know what you think. I'm sure just in those last couple of minutes I've offended quite a few people, but that's okay. Let me know what you think. Leave some comments. It's been a very wet, windy and miserable dog walk. Hopefully the audio's okay. It probably isn't, and this video will probably never see the light of day. But if it does, like, comment and subscribe. Bye.